Well then, Chrono Odyssey developer NPixel has taken a massive hit with some news that has just broken in the last day, and that is the MMO that they released just last year, Grand Saga, is actually closing down. We're going to talk about that briefly, and then we're going to talk about what this means for Chrono Odyssey, if anything. So yeah, what I said there is pretty much true. Grand Saga was basically an anime style MMO that launched, I think, in November 2024. And they recently put out a tweet, it was actually 2 days ago, but I just didn't see this, that the game in the global region Grand Saga was going to be closing down on April 30th. And the reason they cite is actually kind of interesting, because they say they've had difficulties in providing continuous and stable service for users. Now, that is a little bit concerning, isn't it, right? If we get to Chrono Odyssey and they have difficulty in providing continuous and stable services, we might have some serious problems. However, I don't think this is really why they're closing down the game. I think they're probably just closing down Grand Saga because it got overshadowed and it wasn't that popular. I may call it Grand Saga, by the way, with the D, but it's actually Grand Saga. But yeah, the game is available on mobile and on PC, probably within its own launcher as well, but also available on Steam. And the Steam's numbers, if I'm honest, were pretty bad. It peaked at basically 1,000 players. Now, obviously, I can't speak about the other platforms. I don't know how well they did. But in general, I saw nobody really talk about this game. I saw nobody mention it. The next thing I'm hearing is that the game is basically closing down. The game itself, I can't really speak about, right? When I've actually looked at trailers and stuff like that, if I'm honest, it actually looks a little bit interesting. The anime style looks like classic gacha gaming style. The combat looks kind of interesting as well. Maybe not as interesting as some of the, like, you know, Wuthering Waves or Genshin Impact, but it looks alright. The boss fights look cool. They bill it as an MMO because you can actually like party up, something which you can't do in the other gacha games. I'm not calling this a gacha game, by the way. I'm just saying it has that kind of like anime gacha style, but it kind of looks like, I don't know, maybe like a mobile Final Fantasy cartoony anime kind of game. I can't speak to the quality of the game because, as I said, I've never played it and I've watched a review or two, but it's not really up to me to pass on what their thoughts were. But overall, obviously, it seems that it's just simply not done that well. And that's really the main reason. You can't provide continuous and stable services when you don't have any players. It's just not going to do anything. Right, so the game's failed. It actually looks kind of good. I almost wish that I tried it, but really, I didn't even know the game was out, so I completely missed the launch of this in November. Now, this is quite clearly a massive hit for NPixel. Now, we need to clear up just a little bit of confusion. NPixel own the studio, Chrono Studios, who are then making Chrono Odyssey. They're the same thing. It's just that they've made a little like offshoot studio. And there's no two ways to swing it. This is definitely a bad thing to happen to that studio, to NPixel. They would have preferred having a game that was massively successful. And if it was massively successful, maybe the pressure would be off Chrono Odyssey because, you know, they would have a successful game. That, however, is not the case. It does now likely mean that they can focus on Chrono Odyssey. As far as I know, there are no other games in the works. There's nothing announced as to my best knowledge. So all eyes now will be on Chrono Odyssey, a game that they've been working on for many years. Hopefully they can kind of learn lessons from Grand Saga and maybe carry that on to Chrono Odyssey. One thing that they may have learned is that they might need help with the marketing. If me, and I assume many other people, didn't even realize that this mobile PC MMO was out, then maybe the marketing was bad. Well, you know how they might fix that? Well, they're partnering up with Kakao Games. They are the ones who are actually going to publish this, at least in the West. Not sure actually about South Korea. I'm presuming Kakao will also do South Korea. I can't remember the agreement off the top of my head. So maybe they've already learned that lesson and that's why they've partnered up with Kakao. As I just said, it might enable them to actually focus on Chrono Odyssey as well. Ultimately, I don't think there's any risk of the entire studio shutting down. They've been working on Chrono Odyssey many years. I suspect they'd want to get it out and maybe try and reap any kind of financial benefit they can from that. Hopefully they don't rush it though. We want a good MMO, we don't want it rushed. But the fact that they've already had one financial failure, I would assume, is a bit of a concern simply for if that team can keep going. However, I would presume and assume that Kakao Games will maybe be there to publish them and give them some funding because, you know, they want the game to release as well. And they've actually made previous mobile games, which I guess were a little bit more successful. So on the surface, it's kind of like looks bad for the studio that making Chrono Odyssey, for sure. There's no two ways about it. Like, it just looks bad. One of the games that they made has failed. It doesn't necessarily directly mean there'll be an issue with the second game with Chrono Odyssey. Like, it doesn't necessarily mean that that will follow and be bad or have issues as well. It does mean that they could learn lessons from that. Maybe it was the marketing, maybe it was something else. So I strongly suspect Chrono Odyssey will happen. I do think there might be a little bit of a worry here that, as I said, financially, maybe they'll try and get it out the door simply because they need to. But hopefully they see this as a learning experience and make a better game and make a successful game, because that's what we all want. Now let's just move on a little bit. There's been some bad news for Archeage Chronicles. Now, it's worth noting that NPixel are not tied to Kakao in any way other than a publishing agreement as far as we know. So Chrono Odyssey is being published by Kakao. NPixel are not owned by Kakao, it's just a publishing agreement. Kakao are more directly making Archeage Chronicles because they have a studio, XL Games, who are majoritively, if not exclusively, owned by Kakao. I don't know the exact percentages, don't hold me to that. And XL Games has just had somebody who's very important to Archeage Chronicles leave. Jake Song, who has been a key figure in MMOs, for a long time, and specifically Archeage 1, and was going to be Archeage Chronicles, has now left XL Games. What that will mean for Archeage Chronicles? Possibly nothing. These things are not really determined by an individual. These are company-wide decisions that they're doing, and I'm going to guess that they will actually just continue making Archeage Chronicles, except without that founding figure, basically. It's worth noting that Archeage Chronicles is anticipated to be almost nothing like Archeage 1, so maybe the fact that he was one of the founding figures, one of the lead figures with Archeage, might not be that important because they're making a completely different game anyway. Either way, if you're Kakao Games, if you're interested in Chrono Odyssey, if you're interested in Archeage Chronicles, then this news is a little bit unfortunate. The studio that's making Chrono Odyssey had a game that completely failed effectively and is now shutting down. And one of the key figures who has made the Archeage series what it is now leaving Archeage Chronicles, and I think he's just going to take a break. I don't know if he's going to move to a company or make his own studio or what have you, but they have left Archeage Chronicles. Now, does this mean that they're both in significant trouble and we really should be worried? Probably not. As I said, a lot of this is actually team decisions. Entire companies are behind these. They're not going to stop just because of a few little setbacks. They're going to keep pumping and try and actually release these games. Now, they could get cancelled. That's always possible, right? It's possible that they say, oh, we're not happy with the direction of the game, let's cancel it. But if both these games are MMO, action combat RPGs that are supposed to come out, this year or next year, depending on which one you're talking about, it's the end of this year for Chrono Odyssey and mid next year for Archeage Chronicles, then it kind of sounds like the games are too far down the pipeline to cancel. You might as well just release them. They're massive games. Why put in all that effort just to cancel it at the last minute? Especially when the last financials from Kakao was that they're not exactly making a shed ton of profit. In fact, I think they were making a loss. They'll want to recoup that loss. And the way they want to do that really is with Chrono Odyssey and Archeage Chronicles. So their entire focus, that entire company's focus now is going to be on those two games. So I'm not too stressed. Obviously, minor setbacks, but I'm personally not too worried. Let's see what we get. For Chrono Odyssey specifically, they did mention that they were going to have an internal test. There's no indication when that is. And then we're going to get news about a CBT if that internal test goes well. We've not heard anything yet. It's all quiet on the Western Front regards to that. Hopefully, though, we start seeing information about it soon. I would be delighted to see what they're cooking up right there. Have a most beautiful day. If you're interested in Archeage Chronicles or Chrono Odyssey, make sure you hit the subscribe button. If you want to help me, you can become a Patreon. There'll be a link description on the screen somewhere. Other than that, though, have a most beautiful, beautiful day. Like and subscribe. Goodbye.